Hey y'all, Fred here. Thanks so much for joining me today. We're going to do some cut testing with the Rosies. These are still obviously very new to me. I just did a review on these a week or two ago, depending on when this one comes up. If you want to see that original review, I'll put it up here. Little link to it at the top of the screen. You can go back and watch that. I'm going to test these with the factory edge. It came very thin and slicey right out of the box. I didn't feel the need to resharpen them or profile. We're going to be using the old redneck rating scale like we always do, anywhere from 1 cuts like a spoon to 10. You can carve your initials in a grain of rice with this thing. At the moment, we're at 10. I'm going to show you that in just a minute. This is not any particular kind of scientific test or anything. This is just me cutting and then using my scale. I do try to cut with roughly the same square inches you'll see of cardboard. We try to do this consistently from knife to knife, so I at least get some kind of even subjective measurements of, okay, we cut that much cardboard and this is how the blade, how sharp it was after that. We'll cut a little bit of rope and how sharp after that, and some rubber hose and some wood, and we're going to just feel everything from the ergonomics to how good is the edge on this thing. So the real knives, when they come, you get a real one of these, they're most likely going to be a Magna Cut. Now, they do and have made these in different knife steels over the years, but I believe at the moment, if you were to buy a real deal Rosie, you're probably going to get it in a Magna Cut steel with a variety of different handle shapes. These, however, did not come from the company. This came from a well-known online Chinese shopping site, which shall go unnamed here. However, they say this is a 154 cm blade steel. I don't know if that's true, but we're going to see how well it holds up comparatively with our other knives. Let's do a little bit of size comps real quick. I'm going to set this to the side for the moment because I think what we're going to do is use this as my beater knife. I have had to put a bit of work into this. If you go watch my original one, the lock bar wasn't locking up fully. Had to do a little work on that and really bend that lock bar in to make it a stiffer lockup and stronger lockup. Still got a great detent on it, nice sound on it. Definitely has a the thing about this knife is all about the ergonomics. That's what this is all about. And it's one of those weird things. When you get one in your hand, before you actually hold it, you look at it and say, I don't get it. I don't know what all the fuss is about, right? When you hold this in your hand and you put your finger into those choils, and one of the reasons is because the blade tang, you see, fills that front finger choil. So you've got basically 3 widths of steel and titanium right there that really feel solid. Same thing up here on the top with this style of jimping. Your fingers just naturally fit in there. There's curvature to the spine. It's one of those things that when you hold it in your hand for a little while, at first you say, well, it's lighter than I thought it was going to be, and it's smaller than I thought it was going to be. But then you start using it and flipping it and carrying it and holding it and really starting to get used to it, and you realize, man, there's something intangible about the way this feels in your hand, and that's, I think, part of what makes everybody going nuts over these right now. All right, size. This is right at 7 inches long. It's got about a 2.8 inch cutting length here. The blade is a relatively thin 121 thousandths, about 14 thousandths behind the edge, but due to that full flat grind all the way down to a nice thin edge there. Handle is about 0.41, so not even quite a half an inch thick. We're going to see if that comes back and haunts us in the ergonomics. My experience is thinner handles that, even though you can see the edges are knocked down nicely on the corners, nothing sharp in particular, but just, 90-degree corners, even with that little bit of chamfer on them, those can definitely start biting into your hand when you're really pushing down hard into that wood. We're going to find that out. That's one of the things that we're going to see. Let's do some quick size comps just in case you haven't seen these before. Obviously, that is a PM2 and a Para3. It is smaller than both, although considerably more cutting length than the Para3 here. Let's do something maybe a little more modern. How about a Civivi Vision or the ever-popular Pyrite Light? You can see it's shorter than both of those, but again, has equal amount of cutting length to the Pyrite Light. So it's got a pretty fair amount of blade to it. This is one of those knives. This is the category I put these into. So I'm doing cut testing with all of these knives, and this is kind of the group that I think the Rosie fits into. Not necessarily because of price, not necessarily talking quality or fit and finish and all that, but general size and usage. This is your smaller EDC knife, 7 inches and under, usually has that forward finger choil in them, relatively thin, lightweight, easy to carry, right? That's why, that's where this fits. Let's talk about the sharpness of this. Again, I have not sharpened it. I did strop it, but haven't sharpened it from the factory edge. That's pretty darn good. I would say that's a 10. I do have some knives that I have sharpened, which will be a little bit sharpened, more sharp than that. But all in all, you're not going to get sharper than that out of a factory edge, and there's no need for me to reprofile that edge just to do these cut testings. So that being said, let's get over to the cut table and start the cutting. Let's get over to the table and start the cutting.
All right, as usual, we're going to start with about 400 square inches of cardboard. I'm going to start in kind of the choked forward saber grip where, you might expect to hold this knife. It's got that great forward finger choil that really is meant to be used. By the way, I'm in normal speed right now until we get a little farther into this piece of cardboard. Just want you to see how easy and cleanly this thing slices through. So now I've doubled the speed. It tears through it. One of the things that you wonder about, because it's a big sweeping belly blade, is it easy to kind of come out of the cut too early? And as you can see, almost none of these cuts I'm really coming out of early. You do have to kind of pay a little bit of attention to it, maybe tilt your wrist forward a little bit, get the right wrist angle on it, but you can see it slices through these long cuts with no problems at all. Of course, it's a nice thin slicey blade. You would expect it to perform this well, but so far in this test, I mean, it's just slicing through the cardboard like nobody's business. Very easy, very simple. Now let's see, did we do any damage to this blade, this 154 cm supposedly? And you can see in the first cut, nice and clean. I'm going to do a couple more cuts here because I'm not entirely sure. It is cutting cleanly through, but it almost feels as if maybe there might be something in the middle. But it's not snagging. It's not really hanging up at this point in time. So hard to tell. But that's why I keep cutting this piece of paper. Is it feels like it's clean, but yeah, I'm not sure. So I think what I'm going to do is give it a 9 to a 10, somewhere in between there, and we'll see how it goes from here. So this is a test that I don't do very often, probably not often enough, and now I've picked a knife that has a relatively high point on the center line. Not ideal for these types of cuts, but just trying it anyhow. You can see this is obviously not the strong suit. There's something sticking at the top of this cardboard. But, just to show you, it can do it. This is not the perfect knife for it, but it can do it. Let's move on to the hose here. What I'm looking for is to try to push that knife cleanly all the way through the hose without a lot of sawing back and forth. And you can see it's going through pretty well. Again, this is a nice, very thin, slicey blade, pretty sharp. So pretty happy about the way it performs there. And then, of course, with that big belly, you can just pop through any kind of thinner, tougher materials like that. That could even be like a tie strap or something like that you can cut through. Now is where we see right there, it's hanging in the middle of the blade. So now I've got to try to pinpoint it. Is it just one? Is it just this one in the middle of the blade? Once I get past, will it cut okay? And that's pretty much what I'm diagnosing here, is that before the snag and after the snag, all the way out towards the rest of the tip, it seems to be okay if I cut fast enough through the paper. Of course, I need to probably get a better piece of paper here, but just that one snag in the middle. So I'm trying to figure it out, and so definitely a 7 or an 8. That is exactly what it's for. Now with the rope cutting, I'm looking to try to pop cleanly through that rope. You can see the first two appear to struggle a little bit, and then I find kind of the right hold on that knife. And the next few here just pop pretty cleanly. So I'm actually very happy. And that's the joy of having a slicey blade with a nice big belly, is that you can pretty cleanly and easily pop through this Sisal rope. But let's see if it damaged the edge of the blade or not. So that made it look like, well, maybe it's cutting better now than it was after the hose. So I'm trying to just go really slow here and find, did I somehow get that nick out of the middle of the blade? What you're going to see here in a minute is no, it's definitely still there in the middle of the blade. But before and after, again, is it just one nick? Is it multiple nicks? And that's what I'm trying to diagnose here. So I'm down to a 7 on my scale. I have clearly, it says if there's just one good sized snag, then it's a 7. All right, let's try this saber grip choked forward using that finger choil and the good jimping on the back there for some harder use cutting. Staying at real time right now. This is as much about the ergonomics holding it. You know, this is the position that you're probably going to be cutting most things in with that knife. So now I'm going to switch over to kind of a hammer grip. I find that to be easier to really dig into the wood. I can dig in much harder. Usually it cuts a little bit deeper, but usually when I switch to this grip, this is where I will begin to feel any hot spots, particularly with the kind of top squared off edges of this knife, which is what I'm feeling right here. So this is where I'm realizing, yeah, that top, even though, you know, there's no sharp edges to it, but it's pretty squared off across the top. So you just have to know with this knife, and really any titanium knife with squared off edges, that's where I tend to feel it. You know, I don't have the toughest hands. I don't do a whole lot of hard physical work with my hands on a regular basis. I don't have all the hard work calluses. So now I'm just checking to see, is that nick still there in the middle of the blade? Let's go grab a piece of paper and see. Usually I don't see a big change in the sharpness of the edge after the wood. Sometimes it even seems to be better. So you can see I can pass through if I go pretty quickly through, and that's exactly what the 7 is on my scale. There may be one little snag, but if you go fast enough, it will cut cleanly through the paper. So I'm just really re-verifying that, yep, this is in fact what I think it is. It's that one snag in the middle, so we're at a dead even 7. So let's keep on going. All right, so time to strop it up. I actually don't spend that much time stropping it here. I think I went back and counted these up, and it was about 14 strokes per side. I'll speed it up a little bit. I did invest. I'll have, next time we do some cutting tests, a better, newer strop, along with some stroppy stuff and some other liquid CBN, I think it is, diamond emulsion for my strops. So I'm excited to give those a chance. You can see here, I have definitely got the nick out of the middle of the blade. It is cutting cleanly all the way through from start to finish. So very happy about that. Still not a 10. I wouldn't rate it. If you kind of really looked close up at the cuts themselves, you can hear it's tearing just a little bit, but still pretty clean cuts. So I'll give it that a 9 or a 10 on the end. All right, so let's dive into the final stats here. We'll try to make it quick through this. This is the 𝗬𝗏 Rosie Fosie, the fake Fosie. 154 cm is what they say the steel is. I haven't really independently verified that. I don't have a way to do that. They claim it's a 60 to 61 on the hardness scale. For this knife, the Knife Steel Nerds, if you had a good, well heat-treated 154 cm, it should be about a 4.5 on the 𝗏𝗏𝗀𝗏 overall. So a little bit better, certainly, than like an 𝗏𝗏𝗀𝗏13, but also probably somewhere around an AR RPM 9 or even a 9CR18. So yeah, that is what it is. I did not sharpen the knife first. It was plenty sharp to begin with. I gave it a 10, probably a 9.5, really. It wasn't as laser sharp as some of the other knives, but still plenty sharp enough. Cutting cleanly, no problem. About 400 inches of cardboard. After the cardboard, I didn't really see a lot of damage. It was still about probably that 9.5 that we started with. That's kind of surprising. I've only had one other knife that really did that well, and that was the Winterblade Factor B3 with the M390, the real deal M390, and that was after it was sharpened. So that was impressive. But then, strangely enough, after the hose cuts, which I rarely see much drop off after the hose cuts, then I really discovered that nick in the middle of the blade. Had to knock it down to a 7 or 8 on the sharpness scale. Did 11 rope cuts. It cut very nicely through the rope. Very happy once I kind of figured out how to really bear down and use that belly to my advantage. Then after the rope, that snag in the middle was definitely very apparent. A lot of wood cutting there, just really for ergonomics more than anything else. It stayed in that 7 range after that. Did strop it back. I didn't really put a lot of time and investment there into the stropping, about 14 strokes on each side, and that got me back to a 9 to 10, 9.5, which is about where we started. So pretty easy to strop back. I could have done a little bit better. Overall, I'm going to say this was a very good performance, especially compared to all of the other non-sharpened knives that we've tested. Did way better than a whole lot of them. I did have to cut out some of the other tests from the very left side of the screen. You know, like the pyrite went all the way down to a 3. The 𝗀𝗏𝘀𝗁 𝗀𝗏 was a 3 or 4 after the tests. Even the Ontario Radin real magna cut with a good HRC, but that had a really poorly done initial grind on it, so that definitely is not fair for that knife. So I'm going to say really good performance. I'm not calling it excellent. I wish the edge had held a little bit better than it did. But, you know, it's not all that bad. I'm not sure about whether it's really a 60 or 61 on the HRC score. You know, that's to be questioned. I'm going to have to let someone else do the testing on that. It's probably not much worse than that, maybe a 58, 59 if I had to guess. It did pop through the rope and the hose nice and clean and easily. Didn't require any sawing back and forth. It did cut through. Nice slicey blade. The ergonomics on this knife are excellent, except for really hard use cuts. If you really have to bear down and cutting into that wood, but that is not what these knives are for. These are, light to medium duty EDC knives. The ergonomics outside of really hard cuts is phenomenal. That is the primary feature of this knife. It's one of those really weird things, and I'm sure you all have experienced it with at least one knife or another. You get it and you look at it and you think, well, this doesn't really make sense why everybody is kind of going crazy about it. But then after holding it and using it and, fidgeting with it, but really putting it in your hand in a good grip, it just feels really good. And that's what this knife is. That's why I think everybody loves them. It's that intangible quality that once you're holding it in your hand, and even the fidgetiness, the smoothness was surprising. Not on this one that I tested, but on the other skeletonized version. Man, the smoothness in action, and that is really very smooth, very glassy, very enjoyable to fidget with. So it just feels great in the hands. This is by far and away still easily one of my favorite EDC sizes and styles of a knife. It just has that intangible quality that when you're holding it in your hand, it just feels like it was made for your hand. There's so many little things that go into it. I cover a lot of that in the actual review of the knife. You're welcome to go see that. Overall, this is a little bit of a departure. I'm giving it still an 8 or a 9. And if you look back through all the scores, you may or may not have noticed that the final score I give it is almost always directly related to the final sharpness rating after all the tests are done. So, if it ends up at a 7 when all the testing is done before I strop it back, that's usually about where it ends up. It's not like a direct correlation. I'm not specifically doing it because of that. And so in this case, I'm actually giving it a higher. It went down to a 7 on the sharpness scale. I'm going to give it an 8 or a 9. The ergonomics, the feel, how good it felt in the hand, slicing through the cardboard, that thin slicey blade just tore through the material really well. The edge didn't hold up as good as I hoped it would, but it's still, I'm not knocking it that many points just for that. There's certainly a lot of knives with very real, well-known steels that didn't hold up anywhere near as well as this, and I would still consider those to be good EDC users. So I couldn't knock it all the way down to where some of those other ones perform. Overall, I'm giving it an 8 or a 9. Very happy with these knives. Definitely not just going into a collection case, but these are my everyday EDC carry knives. And because of the cost I was able to pick them up at, I mean, it's a no-brainer that this thing feels good in the hand, thin slicey blade, strops back really easily, held its edge decently well, definitely held its edge compared to all the other non-sharpened knives. So for all those reasons, I'm giving it an 8 or a 9. Somewhere we'll call it an 8.5. Hopefully this was insightful for you guys. It's always curious to me how these will hold up, because you never know what you're getting. This is like the box of chocolates where you never know what you're going to get. So hopefully this was helpful. informational. As always, if you're not already subscribed, I would love for you to be a subscriber. Hit that notification bell. That certainly helps us out. Throw me a thumbs up. That'll help the videos and helps the channel out a lot too. Love to hear what you guys think in the comments. If you'd like to see me do the test a little bit differently, I'm trying to speed these up so they're not quite so long. But let me know your feedback. I always look forward to hearing from you guys, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks. Have a great day.